Hello, this is James Currier. I think I'm live. Uh, Good to meet you all, or good to see you all. We're going to be talking about how to grow these marketplaces. And why am I talking about growth? Well, I've helped over 12 companies get to over 10 million users each. One of them got to about 175 million users. I've invested in 240 companies, 60 of which are marketplaces. So I've been doing this a long time. I've spoken at the Marketplace Conference every year. It's been around in the Bay Area. And I'm helping to run with Pete Flynn and with Guy Levy and Morgan Beller are running a venture capital firm called NFX. And we're a seed stage firm, got a $275 million fund to invest $1 to $3 million in companies that are pretty early stage, anywhere from 2 people to 15 people. And we typically invest and take about 15 or 20% of the companies and work every week with the companies to get them going for the next year and a half, get them on the right trajectory. So I've spent a lot of time looking at growth, a lot of time building my own companies and then helping others. So that's why I'm talking about it today. So what's different about growing marketplaces? Well, there's a lot. The first thing, compared to doing a SaaS company or doing a consumer company or a direct to consumer company, e-commerce company, there's lots of different types of companies that are now being touched by software. But with marketplaces, there's some real issues, some real problems that are different from trying to do growth in other types of businesses. And the first thing is that you have to grow 2 types of customer bases. It's essentially like running 2 companies. And that means you have to manage multiple channels. You have to manage channels for the supply side, channels for the demand side. If you're looking at a 3-sided marketplace, you might have a channel for that 3rd side. So now you're having to manage multiple channels across multiple consumer types. You have to manage the timing of each of the growth. So if you could figure out a great channel for the supply side and grow that like crazy, but if you don't bring the demand side along, then the supply side won't achieve liquidity. And so it doesn't work. And you know this, that you've got to actually manage the timing of it. If you're running a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company, as soon as you get it going, just grow the hell out of it. Just make it as big as possible. Same thing with SaaS sales software. You don't have to worry about the timing. As soon as it starts working, go. But in marketplaces, even once you get it working, you have to worry about over bringing on a particular side of the marketplace. So that's a unique challenge. The other thing is that compared to most companies that I've worked with, tracking the cohort retention numbers is really important. You have to track them in all businesses, in gaming and whatnot, but really tracking it carefully in marketplaces has proven critical to people being successful or not. And it's got to be very precise. And then the 5th thing is that you go through multiple growth seasons. So you might be growing the supply for a while, and then you're going to try to put that on ice while you grow the demand side. You might have to tell people that you're coming in as a broker and then switch over to more of a marketplace and then switch over to more of a market network. You go through various seasons of marketplace development. And having worked with companies like Poshmark and others over the years, what they were doing on growth in year 1 was not what they were doing for the first 6 months of year 2, nor the second 6 months of year 2. It was changing. You have to figure out something new. That difference in season is really quite different than most other types of businesses that we work with. So these 5 things make marketplaces really difficult. And I want to remind us all that there's actually 4 types of growth. There are 4 things you are growing. One is your new users. The second is your activated users. And those are not always the same. And when I say activated, what I mean is, do they get the aha? Do they get the glory of what you're bringing to them? Do they understand that? Could they explain it back to you? That means that they're activated. Are they retained? Do they come back on a regular basis in some important cadence, whether it's weekly or monthly or daily? And then are they monetized? Are you making money through their transactions? Are you making money through SaaS fees? Are you making money through membership fees? Where, through fintech products you're selling them, whatever it is, are they being monetized? And these 4 things are different, and it's really different types of growth. So now you're looking at the complexity of having to look at new users, activated users, retained users, monetized users for supply, and then the same thing for demand. So now you have sort of 8 surface areas that you're working on simultaneously. But it gets more complicated than that, because if you're in the B2C side, not only are you managing your supply and demand, but you've got different types of channels. So you've got your influencers or your Google, your Facebook, these are your normal channels. These are the things that there's been a lot written about. There's lots of software tools for. If you're on the B2B side, you're growing through traffic that's coming from odd newsletters at nobody really knows about, or odd blog posts, or odd conferences, or odd magazines, nichey things that aren't sort of well understood, that aren't obvious like they are on the B2C side. So now you have the complexity of the channels you're going after for each supply, each demand, depending on whether you're B2B or B2C. What that means is that growth in marketplaces is a difficulty 10. Okay. And it's, I think, helpful to understand that going into it. And of course, the fact is that marketplaces, tend to take 7 to 10 years to really get good anyway. And so you're now doing this over a long period of time. So I want to go through 12 things that you can think about in terms of how to reduce this complexity and do well with growth in marketplaces. Right. So the first thing is to figure out which side matters and focus on it. This is actually very challenging emotionally for people, particularly when it's easy, let's say, to get the supply side. And therefore, your team is excited because it's easy to get this, but it's actually a demand side marketplace. So it's hard to get the demand. If you solve the demand, the supply will come, let's say, in my example. But it's hard to do that. And so you and your team are much more energized by going and working on the supply problem and seeing success, and then reporting back to me, the investor, oh, we're doing great on the supply side. The next month, we're doing great on the supply side. And the next month, a year later, we're still doing great on the supply side. Yeah, I get it. Stop focusing on the supply side. I know it's easy, but that's not going to actually build you a business. You have to take your attention away, your emotions away, and you have to put it on the harder part of it. And so what we see often is that even when people can identify that, let's say, demand is harder to get, they still won't spend their time on it. And half or more of the team will be spending time on the area that's easy. So, and not only do you have to focus on the hard side, but you actually have to find the white hot center of the harder side of the marketplace. Okay. Because not all, let's say, demand side are equal. The ones that have more demand or that come on faster, they're the important ones. You need to identify what is the subsegment within the demand side that is the most important part. That if you got that piece, it would bleed pretty quickly into the rest of the demand side. Okay. And then you've got to find a channel to that white hot center, to that small group, and then activate them on the harder side. So that's the first thing to do when you think about growth. And if you fail to do that, you're going to spend a lot of months burning a lot of capital and congratulating yourself, and you're going to be able to sleep at night, but you're not going to be getting anywhere with your business. It's going to be an illusion. Secondly, you need to lock in one side with the SaaS. So this is a tactic that we use often, which is if you find one, you're trying to get the timing between the demand and the supply. If you can build SaaS tools to bring on the important side or one of the sides, to put them on ice so that they will be there when you can go and get the other side, then that's a really good tactic and a really good approach. Third thing I'll mention is realize that viral growth is now hard. So you need to get really good at buying traffic. That means bringing in the right person, basically. Bringing in the spreadsheet jockey, bringing in the person who thinks in numbers, bringing in the person who isn't going to, by accident, spend $250,000 on an acquisition campaign that doesn't work for you. Because, look, over time, if you look at the viral channels, they are coming down. See the big red arrow going down? The viral growth channels over time have been coming down as the platforms are aggregating more traffic and they're putting toll booths in front of the traffic. That's their business model. They put toll booths in front of the traffic. They are doing what they're supposed to do. And you now have to pay to get access to the people on their platform. So realize that the viral stuff is going away. That means that paid traffic matters more. That means you have to hire the right person to run your campaigns, have that DNA in your company, and you've got to raise more capital. That means more dilution for you. And that dilution is because the platforms aren't letting you get access to the traffic for free anymore. Okay, so make that mental shift toward really understanding paid traffic and realize you're going to have to raise a little bit more capital to go pay for that. Fourth thing I'll mention is that, look, A/B testing still rules. Okay, A/B testing needs to be in your company DNA level. This is at the level of company DNA about A/B testing. You've got to do onboarding A/B testing for your supply side, retention loop testing, viral loops A/B testing, monetization A/B testing. It needs to run through the entire experience on both supply and the demand. That's why it needs to be a DNA level, company DNA level understanding about A/B testing. The fifth thing, same thing for cohort analysis, right? Again, understanding the precision of your cohorts and being good at tracking that, understanding where did that cohort come from? That cohort came from an ad campaign we did on mobile, a spattering of mobile apps. And look, it's just not retaining as well. That means our whole month is down. That means it's hard for us to raise capital. That means, you have to be able to track and identify where the traffic's coming from and what those cohorts are doing. And it's got to be almost everyone's job in the company. I remember, in my first digital company, someone said to me, "What's your job as CEO of this 120 person company?" I said, "I write email subject lines and I read triangle charts. That's my job. I read triangle charts." Everybody should be reading triangle charts to understand about the various cohorts on both the supply and the demand, based on all the different channels, who's activated, who's not, who's retained, who's not, right? So this is your job, is to do the A/B testing and then to look at these cohort analyses. The sixth thing I'll mention is that you've got to get enough traffic so that you can start A/B testing, so you can start doing cohort analysis. And that just means spending capital to acquire people in, or doing whatever you need to do to get enough traffic so that you can get enough data so that you can make decisions quickly. Now, if you want to learn more about how you do that, you can go and look at a different long essay called 19 Ways to Solve the Chicken or Egg Problem for Marketplaces that we wrote a few years ago at NFX.com in the essays section. All right, that will give you a bunch of different playbooks about how to get enough traffic so that you can start to make these decisions. The seventh thing I'll mention, now we're starting to get into other aspects of growth that are actually underlying everything, which is your own psychology. Right? The CEO can't really delegate growth. And the reason for that is that when you try to make something grow, you often break something that already exists. And the people on your team are going to be hesitant to try to break things that already exist, to change things around. And they need to get the confidence from you as the CEO that you can and should break things, that you can and should try more experiments. And without your leadership in this, by saying, "Oh, it's a growth team," or "I'm leaving it up to my VP marketing," it will be a third or 25% of what it could be if you were really thinking through what are the major changes we would need to make in order to really get growing quickly. Because growth is about how you name the company. It's about the language you use, and we'll go into that. So you really, number 8, you really want to be looking for 1,000% improvement, 10,000% improvement, not 10% improvement. 10% improvements typically get you nowhere, particularly at early stage marketplaces. You've got to have a breakthrough. You've got to have several breakthroughs on both the supply and the demand, typically, in order for you to create a billion-dollar company, something that's meaningful, impactful. Okay. You can't just be doing incremental things, and your team will want to do incremental things because they have a job, they have other teammates that have their lanes, and they're going to think incrementally. They're going to say, "This is the business, this is what I'm focused on, I will make this better today." They go to sleep at night feeling good about themselves. They wake up feeling good, energized to come the next day because yesterday they had a 4% increase. They feel good. They can't live that way. Not in a startup lane. Not with marketplaces. Not when these things take so long. You need multiple breakthroughs of 1,000%, 10,000% in order to build one of these businesses. So you can't get complacent, and you can't be lying to yourself about the fact that you're making progress when you're not making a ton of progress. Ninth thing I'll mention is you've got to psychologically be able to sustain the pain of failure. Look, you've got to have a high cadence of experiments, these A/B tests, looking at different channels and different cohorts. High cadence of experiments. You're going to have many failures. It's going to take 5 to 9 years to make one of these things really start to go. It always does. It always feels like it's coming, and then it just takes a long time. Marketplaces take a long time. And this, many failures, is really hard on your employees. You've got to manage the culture. You've got to manage the emotions and the expectations so that people can sustain over a long period of time doing a high cadence of experiments, most of which are going to fail. All right? This is absolutely critical to getting to the point where you can build a real business. Number 10, language sets up all the growth, whether it's the name of your company or how you do things. And the example, this is from the New Yorker. This kid on the left side is selling lemonade for 20 cents a glass, and this other kid next to him is selling a lemonade cleanse for $20 a glass, and he's got a lot of customers because he added the word cleanse, and cleanse is something that people want today. And this is a stark example of how language matters. What are you selling to the supply? What are you selling to the demand? the pieces, the words you use, the actual words, the language is at the foundation of what growth is, because for the various reasons. So a radical idea is to say, let's choose language first and choose features second. Most people want to build and then add language to it. Well, we'll build it, it'll make it good, it'll work, it'll provide value. That's what we're here to do. And then we'll add language to it. We'll market it. We'll add marketing language to it. We don't see it that way. You actually choose the language first, and then you build the product to reflect the language. Try it. Try this out. It's a killer growth technique. Most people don't believe in. Most people don't understand. We've done it for 2 decades, and it works every time. So try this radical idea. You'll be amazed at what you get out of it. So the 11th thing out of the 12 is viral loops. So here's a simple viral loop. Now you probably have read about viral loops, thinking about them, and viral is tough. But if you can get a 0.2 or 0.3 or 0.4 virality on your product, it'll drop your cost of customer acquisition by 50%. So it's worth trying to do this, and it's worth doing it because just the act of doing it helps people in the marketplace understand that there's a community and that there's other people here that they can benefit from and leverage from. So a quick viral loop, you start with, what is it to the user? What is its value? And what are the words? What's the language that you use to describe that? Okay, be very precise about the words and the language. Then you just try to figure out, why would they want to send it to someone else? What about the language helps them understand that it's valuable and they should want to send it to somebody else? By using the word, this is a network, or this is a marketplace, or this is, have your collaborators, or use language that helps them understand why they should send it to someone else. And then figure out what channel they're going to send it on. Are they going to send it on an email? Are they going to send it over WhatsApp? Are they going to send it on Facebook Messenger? Are they SMS? There's so many different channels that you could choose. Why they're sending it, what they're sending needs to match up with the channel. Okay, it needs to get in that loop. And then once you figure out that channel, it then leads people back into this loop. That's a very simple viral loop. There's a lot more complicated analyses we could do about what a viral loop looks like. But if you start with this simple approach to it, you might get some insights. You and your team might get some insights on the growth side. And then, of course, you A/B test this over and over and over again. And 29 times out of 30, it doesn't work. Okay, 29 times out of 30, it is going to fail. And you have to accept that before you go into it. You still have to get the energy up at the beginning of the day to try again. Right? That's the job. That's the opportunity you have to build a multi-billion-dollar company. Those opportunities don't come easy. The suffering you have to go through to get to that multi-billion opportunity is go through something hard, okay? Which is 29 failures out of 30. Right? And then the 12th thing is retention loops, all right? Starts with the same thing. What is it to the user? What's the value? What are the words you're choosing? And that's going to send you to a trigger. What is going to trigger them to even think of you? Okay, what's that trigger? Is it an email that comes to you because something's newly available? What is that trigger? What is the action that they need to take? Don't bury it in a lot of words. Just give them the reason. What's the trigger? And then here's the action. All right. And then what's the reward they're going to get? And then once they're getting a reward, how do they build their identity, or how do they build their business through this process? Okay. Now, most people don't have this last piece in their retention loop, but I do, because ultimately you need to become part of somebody's life in order to get a lot of value out of your customer. Whether it's buying sneakers in a marketplace or whether it's buying lead pipe in a marketplace, you have a reputation, you have things you're collecting, you have relationships to buyers and sellers, you have relationships to other people in your family that might be liking your sneakers, or people in your company that need the lead pipe. There's ways of helping people build their identity and their business in a longer term way through your product, adding SaaS tools, various ways to help them build their identity in their business, or their business. And that helps people to have more triggers to come back. And it feeds the loop of more and more triggers if you can get people engaged in that way. And of course, with this, you A/B test, until you see that retention. So for more about marketplaces, we've got it at nfx.com in the essay section, lots of videos, that sort of thing. And I'm on Twitter as well. And so I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to open up the chat client, and you can ask me any questions, and I'd be happy to answer them if I can find that. Let me go up here in the chat. Can you expand on the principle of language first and provide an example? An example that I've used in the past is the idea that we had a website that allowed you to store photos. This is 15 years ago when storing of photos was still hard online. And we didn't have many people using it. We had 20 or 30,000 people using it, and no one was really coming. And so what I did was I changed the homepage. Instead of saying store your photos, it said share your photos. And then my team came up to me, a couple hours later saying, James, what the heck is that? Our site doesn't let you share photos. And I said, right, figure it out. It doesn't. You're right. It's broken at this point. And within a few days, they had changed the product the features around so that the primary thing that you would do once you uploaded a photo was to share it. And we grew to 47 million users in the span of 6 months after that. And so just by changing that one word from store to share, it ended up transforming the company because it transformed how the team was thinking about the product and what promise they felt they were making to their 30,000 customers. And it made them very upset that they were disappointing their 30,000 customers. They were angry at me because they felt as if they were making fools of themselves. But then they went and fixed that, and then we grew the company pretty quickly. So that's an example that you can use. Could you provide some tips and insights for low customer, high take managed marketplace platform with viral loops? I'm not sure I get that question. Let me move on to another question. Can you speak to how to manage transition from SaaS to SaaS-enabled marketplace? Yeah, that's happening more and more, right? There are more and more companies that have started out as SaaS companies who are realizing that a really good revenue model is going to be around taking transaction fees, or a really good way to lock in their SaaS revenues or just charge more for the SaaS would be to also provide a marketplace. Yeah, I mean, it typically comes with finding of your SaaS users, finding the white hot center, a few customers who have either requested a marketplace and then giving them what they need, or it's identifying a group that you think is probably the best group to go after, and then just building a small scale version of a marketplace, giving them some sort of a pinhole look into folks coming in that are coming in on the other side already, or people you can just go by on Google to start to see how it would work. But we generally start pretty slowly just to see what everybody likes, because when you open up a marketplace to a SaaS buyer, they often get very nervous about their own business, what's going to be shared, what's transparent, am I going to lose leverage in my business? Look, most business to business activity and profits come from a lack of information, right? It's opacity that creates margin in most business to business, because lead pipe is lead pipe is lead pipe. But if you don't know where the cheapest lead pipe is, or you don't know where the most available lead pipe is, because there's no opacity, there's opacity, there's no transparency in the data, then the person who's selling you the lead pipe actually has a margin. Once you see that information, their margin goes away. So in general, B2B marketplaces have been 25 years behind B2C, because everyone's going after the same thing in B2B, which is margin. And so you have to be careful as you roll out that marketplace that you don't take your SaaS customers and freak them out, that they're going to lose leverage and therefore margin. Let's see. Can you speak to, let's see, could you talk more about the idea of seasons of growth? So yeah, what I've seen with marketplaces is that, and actually it's true of networks like Facebook and other networks that we've built as well, but really distinctly in marketplaces, what you're doing at the beginning to grow is going to be really different. Like, you could grow simply by cold emailing 30 people at the beginning, but cold emailing at scale doesn't really work. So how you're going to grow in one season is not going to be how you're going to grow in the next season. Or, you might find that there's a channel. I remember we had a company that had discovered Facebook mobile when Facebook mobile was first coming out 8 years ago and 7 years ago. and very few people were advertising on Facebook mobile. And so they discovered how to advertise on Facebook mobile. They were buying new users for 4 or 5 cents, and that lasted for 4 months. And then those tools opened up, and the marketplace got more efficient, and suddenly Facebook mobile cost about the same as other channels. And so that season was over. And so you, as a founder and a manager of your team, have to be communicating to folks that, look, this is great, but you're not done. There's a mindset about growth, which is that it's always new, it's always changing, and you go through different seasons, just like the fall comes and the winter comes and the spring. You can't stop it. And so why get annoyed with it? Just make sure that you have some boots in the attic for when the snow comes. You get prepared. And so you have to mentally prepare for changing how you are being successful this week. Okay, and it always gets back to people wanting to do a good job. Like most of the people working at your companies were very smart. They were good at school. They were successful. They've had other jobs where they're successful. They're not used to failing. And once they find success, they want to feel like that's going to be permanent. And then growth, it's not. It's the opposite of permanent. It's constantly changing. That's why we call it seasons. I think we're getting close to 3 minutes left. Maybe I'll take one more question. How would you clearly define the difference between network effect and viral effect, especially in B2B marketplaces? So this is, we just published an article called Viral Effects Are Not Network Effects. And you can go to nfx.com essays and read that there for more information. But look, viral is about getting new users for free from your existing users. Network effects are about retaining the users you have so that they can't get the same value anywhere else. They will never leave you because they just can't get that same value anywhere else. And anyone who's behind you in terms of the number of people using your marketplace just can't provide the liquidity, can't provide the pricing, can't provide the value. And so they're very different concepts. They're both got the word effects at the end. And it is true that things that have network effects, like a Facebook or an eBay, do have, it's easier to build viral effects on top of those, mostly because conceptually people understand the more people here, the better for me. So they are more amenable to going viral on a network effect business, but they are not the same thing and they're not the same playbooks. And particularly in B2B, because people are competitors, people are worried about their margin, it's proven much harder to get viral on B2B than it is on B2C. And so but the benefit of the B2B customers is that they're worth a lot more than the B2C customers typically. And so you can afford to acquire them. You can pay $1,000, $10,000 per supply side or demand side, whichever is the hardest one, in order to kickstart the marketplace, and it ends up being worth it. So we ended up growing our B2B in a lot more paid ways than in viral ways. So it's 11:29, so we're going to end here. I understand they need to wrap up the whole conference, but thanks for having me. Glad to be here.